Welcome to Weekly Recaps, where we discuss the latest news in business, technology, and politics. Following last week's discussion on the MOU between Iran and the United States, we have a lot of back and forth between the two that seem to be jeopardizing the potential that the two come to an agreement. It's really been a he said, she said between the IRGC and United States, where the IRGC is claiming the drone strike was a retaliation for U.S. actions, and the U.S. claiming their retaliations were based on the drone strike to our cruise ship. And unfortunately, it's at a point where Vice President J.D. Vance quotes, "Violence will be met with violence." So obviously, it seems like it's going to be a while before the two are able to resolve their differences. Regardless, this seems to be a negative-sum game at the moment, but we'll continue to cover this as things play out. A few days ago, OpenAI and Broadcom announced their partnership in the Jalapeno chip, which is a specific processor for OpenAI's use case, dissimilar to the GPUs that they previously got from NVIDIA. This was actually built using OpenAI's large language model and had a 9-month period from ideation to prototype, which is pretty fast based on comparisons. Now, one of the interesting things Gavin Baker noted in the All In podcast was now that OpenAI has come out with their own chip, this will likely lead to NVIDIA building on their infrastructure and utilizing internal models. So as I mentioned last week, with the Chinese models likely looking to replicate NVIDIA's structure and vertically integrating things, we're likely to see more companies building out multiple phases of the tech stack in-house. Personally, I see this as a win-win scenario because this is going to allow for more competition within different verticals, and more than likely the best product in each vertical is going to win. And speaking of best products, as I mentioned last week, China's ZAI released the GLM 5.2 model, which landed a big splash for open source models. And White House AI czar David Sachs has repeated over and over that regulation within the space is likely to lead to the downfall of America at the forefront of AI. And due to various factors, whether it be government incentives or strictly labor force, I would imagine within the next year, China will surpass the US when it comes to AI technologies. Last week, IBM also debuted their nano chip, which each one is about the size of your fingernail, and it packs 100 billion transistors. And on top of that, they've also implemented a multi-layered design, which you can see here. And to my knowledge, this is one of a kind. So IBM seems to be pioneering on both the size and space efficiencies for processing chips. Now, probably one of the coolest stories you might not have heard of, but there is a new low-cost EV truck starting around $25,000. Now, when it comes to features, the truck is very basic. It even has manual window cranks, no tech-enabled dashboard or anything like a Tesla, and its estimated range is around 200 miles, with its tow capacity being 2,000 pounds and about 1,500 pounds for load carry. So it's definitely a bare bones spec, but interesting nonetheless. In the startup space, General Intuition raised $320 million on a $2.3 billion valuation, with the thesis they can train their AI agents on video games. And when I initially heard this, I thought this was laughable because I heard they were training on Fortnite, which is a first-person shooter, and I thought that's exactly what we need, more wartime capability. Now, all jokes aside, I believe the main use case for this is allowing physical robots to be trained by a brain that has real-world motion experience. And they have a lot of heavy hitters that are backing them. Colsa Ventures, General Catalyst, Jeff Bezos, Eric Schmidt, and founder Pim DeWitt was formerly at OpenAI, so you can see here he references the infrastructure he'd like to build out so that others can build upon their gaming simulation, which is both good PR and practice. Recently, I watched a video of how Polymarket is scamming users with a similar URL titled Polymarket with a capital I instead of an L. And this was a Wall Street Journal report that had mentioned majority of Polymarket users are losing funds, but an easy way for them to market the site is by using this fake site that generates falsified winnings so that content creators can post to get more users to the site, which is very interesting. That came out about a week ago, similar to the timing of this report of hackers stealing users' funds. And just about every week we see a breach with a major company, and usually the hacker gains customer data information, but very rarely have I seen reports on funds being stolen. And of course, it seems like they're doing everything possible to get the customers their refunds. It says here a phishing campaign was the likely cause. And this is unfortunate because if that's the case, Polymarket really doesn't have much they can do, as that's a user discretion error. But I'm sure at some point most of us have fallen victim to phishing campaigns. After we've seen 2 recent successes with indie films in Hollywood, Google is now taking a large stake in indie filmmaker A24 with the hopes of implementing more AI content into movie scenes. So A24 will now be partnering with Google's DeepMind to speed up the filmmaking process using AI-generated materials. After recent troubles with WhatsApp, Meta is now investing almost $1 billion for a 20% stake in Cred, which is a card processing company out of India. Their founder, Kunal Shah, will now be heading up the WhatsApp team, while prior head of WhatsApp, Will Cathcart, will be focusing more on dev tools and AI tooling. And we've mentioned before that hyperscalers such as Amazon, Google, and Microsoft are really the closest companies to have the infrastructure necessary for the future of compute, but majority of them still have lots of constraints and lots of duties for current customers. So due to things like that, we're seeing a lot more investments in future power sources, infrastructure, grid build-outs coming from the public dollars to provide the infrastructure and compute necessary for this next wave of technology. One of these initiatives was Trump's executive order to speed up the process of quantum computing while trying to mitigate the security risks associated. So the Department of Energy is going to be teaming up with the private sector and companies like Google and Microsoft to try to expedite this process and have a quantum computer that's powerful enough for research by 2028. Coinciding with the build-outs, there's many costs that are associated with that gets passed down to the general consumers, one of them being data center-related inflation, which earlier this week, Tim Cook announced a $200 price hike in both iPhones and MacBooks that I'm fairly certain he associated with the cost of manufacturing the AI chips that are in those devices. But specifically with data centers, these are very complex operations and require a lot of capital investment upfront. Economist Steinwein Neuerberg of Columbia Business School estimates that the AI build-out will cost around $8 trillion in the next 5 years or so. So since there's such demand for the infrastructure needs and continuous improvement of AI, a lot of the costs associated, whether it be utilities prices, real estate, or rare earth materials, are going to go up. It's been a while since we've heard of a SPAC offering, but Agility will be going public with their Digit robots being sold to Amazon, which that relationship makes a lot of sense with Amazon being one of the largest companies for warehouse robots, as well as one of the largest companies paying out workers' comp for warehouse employees. Agility is led by Peggy Johnson, who's a former Microsoft exec. Unfortunately, after the SPAC, Johnson predicts that only 10,000 robots will be produced annually. So it seems like it'll be a while before they replace us. However, I can't be so optimistic when it comes to Boston Dynamics or Tesla. So hopefully we'll have something to cover from them in the future. In the last month or two, we've seen a revitalized space race with everyone reaching for the stars. So MDA Space, which is a Canadian company, is now buying Blue Canyon. And really this is a measly deal at $620 million. And it seems like their biggest hope with this is to get government contracts from the US. Yikes. With the recent press and capital raise for SpaceX, that's unlikely. And then lastly, for AI cybersecurity, the group that's now titling themselves the Five Eyes, which is Australia, Canada, New Zealand, Great Britain, and the United States, recently released a statement on their views of AI. And the main takeaway is that AI is here, AI is powerful, AI can be dangerous, and that we as a society should use it to benefit humanity and not replace ourselves. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. To catch up on prior weeks, click the playlist here, and thanks for watching.